find one.
What? Get out of here! Who even made that?
Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animated features not made by Disney. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little tired. I haven't been able to sleep much. The heat in California is crazy, but I will say this much. I'm gonna try my best to explain what I'm going through in terms of the movie I'm talking about, and yeah, let's just try to have a good show, but hopefully you enjoy it at least. How many of you are aware of Blazing Saddles? Classic Mel Brooks movie, honestly one of his best, if not his best. I'd argue it's probably his best. About a town that is trying to be run off the map by this greedy bad guy, and to try to keep the town from fighting back, he decides, okay, I'm gonna give them the worst possible sheriff I could find, which he decides is, okay, it's gonna be a black man. And from there's a lot of comedy. It's a very funny movie because, well, you would assume like, oh, okay, so he hired a black man and this is gonna be bad for everyone. Of course it does come off with people being racist to the guy, but slowly we start to see that, oh, this guy that he thought was just a loser or bad or whatever at his job is actually really good at being a sheriff. Like, he's quickly able to take down foes, win over bad guys to his side. He does all that kind of stuff. So, that's the big joke that, what the villain assumed was going to be an incompetent black man ended up being a very competent person fighting against them. So he pretty much created his own demise. And for years, this has been used as a movie that a bunch of free speech people, like the people who are like, oh, we're politically incorrect or whatever, would say like, oh, this can't be made now because people are way too soft and whatnot, which that's far from the truth. It's just that times change, and we don't need another Blazing Saddles because we already have a Blazing Saddles, and it's just one of those things where it's like, look, whatever you think Blazing Saddles is, like, yes, it is a very offensive movie, but it's also a very progressive movie. Like, most of the jokes hold up well because it's not at the expense of the black man, it's at the expense of the racist. So realistically, if that movie were made today, aside from some slight changes, it would pretty much still be the same movie. At least that's what we would have assumed until someone actually decided to remake Blazing Saddles, but this time as an animated movie featuring a dog trying to be a samurai in a country full of cats. The recent Nickelodeon Paramount movie Paws of Fury, originally titled Blazing Samurai, is a Blazing Saddles remake. And on those regards, I always kind of felt like this is probably going to be bad. This is probably not going to work. This is probably going to be one of the worst movies of the year. And to be fair, in terms of the ones I've seen, it is among the worst, but I fully acknowledge that I have not seen enough bad movies this year. Like, I've only seen around 40 movies, give or take, and it's mostly been the movies that I've had interest in. And I've mostly walked away enjoying a lot of them. There's been a lot of good movies this year. But I know that there's a lot of bad movies, too, that I have just not bothered watching. But to its credit, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Paws of Fury, formerly Blazing Samurai, which was honestly the better title, is surprisingly a decent movie. Now, I just want to get it out of the way. It's not good. I say decent, but it's still pretty bad. And realistically, okay, well, you know what? Let's get through it. The story of the movie is pretty much the same as Blazing Saddles, sorry. If for the most part, it's pretty much just like, okay, yeah, the dog, is appointed as this town's samurai instead of sheriff to protect it. But of course, it ends up being the villain's downfall. The villain here, played by Ricky Gervais, wants to be the new shogun or whatever, and he thinks that, by getting rid of this place, it'll get him that position or get him closer to that position or something like that. I don't know, I couldn't really follow on that much, but, just think of it as Blazing Saddles and you'll pretty much be fine. And yeah, this movie, it does take some differences. Like, honestly, the biggest thing, and this is the one that I really hated from the movie, is that Whereas in Blazing Saddles, the sheriff is competent. And here, the main character, played by Michael Cera, the dog, is a very incompetent person. He's not, he's still learning how to be a samurai. He meets up with a samurai who eventually trains him, and it's pretty much like Gene Wilder's role from the original movie. Only in here, he's more of a master to the main character, and it's like, I mean, I kind of appreciate that you still made him a drunk, especially considering that that's something you see in a lot of family features. But it's still like, I don't know, I think that just ruins the joke. And I get it that the directors were, well, the people behind this were pretty much like, oh yeah, we didn't want to lean in on the racial stuff because we wanted this to be more open and not so political, which I'm like, so you're acknowledging that the original movie was political, considering that it had race. I mean, realistically, all movies are political, but, a lot of these people have to try to pretend like, stuff like Blazing Saddles wasn't political. So that ends up being the case. You have the dog being trained by the actual samurai, and he gets help from the actual samurai for the most part, to the point that it's like, yeah, he doesn't really claim an actual victory until pretty much the end of the movie, but that doesn't stop them from having a bit where he thinks he's succeeded, and thinks he's like this big strong hero type, and it goes to his head. And yeah, for the most part, a lot of that stuff is generic and it just doesn't work. It's just, like if you've seen one animated film about a loser who tries to be better, you've pretty much seen this movie. If you've seen Blazing Saddles, you've definitely seen this movie, because a lot of the plot points are pretty much the same, just altered in certain ways. But again, it's just those small little changes, like making him incompetent, that ruins it, because it's like, well, the strength of the original was that since he was competent, it kind of was like a fuck you to racists. Without that, it really just turns into any generic family feature, and it's just like, it kind of backfires on its message. And for as much as they want to say like, oh, we don't want to put in the racist messages in here, they still kept it in, because the main character is at first like, oh, he's in jail because he's a dog and we don't allow dogs in this country, he's an illegal immigrant, which I'm like, okay, that's pretty strong language for this kind of thing. And there's even characters saying stuff like, oh, I don't like dogs because my father hated dogs, so that was good enough logic for me. And I'm like, this is all pretty loaded stuff for a kids movie that's trying to avoid talking about racism. Like, some of it did make me laugh, but it's still like, knowing that behind the scenes stuff where like, oh, we were trying to avoid that stuff, is like, no, it's still there, so I don't know why you're trying to pretend that otherwise. And, yes, to be fair, it doesn't go all in on it, but that's kind of the problem here. It just doesn't go in on it enough, and it just feels very lackluster for it. It just feels very weak for it. Despite that, I didn't hate watching this. That's the weird part. I mean, to be fair, the main reason why I even watched this to begin with was because I had heard from a lot of people like, hey, this is actually not that bad of a movie. I mean, it's still not good, but, it has its moments, and it's surprisingly a smarter movie than you would expect given the trailer. So I was like, oh, okay. And, yeah, some jokes did land. The thing I really liked about this movie is the tone of it being like this fourth wall breaking. Like, it's something that you really don't see with a lot of animated features, especially with comedies. And this is even with live action, if we're being honest, where it's like, they fully acknowledge, like, look, this is just a movie. Don't take it seriously. We're going to be doing a bunch of stupid shit in it. We're going to have characters, breaking the fourth wall, acknowledging the audience. Sometimes the characters will jump out of the screen. Sometimes they'll acknowledge a scene transition. Characters running into, like, the title logos and stuff like that. And I'm like, I appreciate it for that. Like, there's, like a joke that I remember seeing before I watched the movie, when some people were saying, like, hey, there's some bits here that are actually not that bad, where the main character is like, oh, life is short and this movie's about to end, so, we should really just get together and solve this problem, or something along those lines. And I'm like, as much as I want to hate it, that stuff is pretty clever and pretty funny. And it's amusing to me that we're doing that kind of stuff in movies, because it's not a common thing you see in movies anymore. So it's amusing to me to see characters acknowledging that they're in a movie and breaking the fourth wall and all that stuff. And yeah, that ends up being a strength to the movie, that it is breaking the fourth wall, and it does have some clever jokes here and there, like when they're do the whole scene of like, oh, we're rounding up as many bad people as we want. I mean, as we need to basically destroy the town, which, in the original movie, there was like a whole bit with the clan. They don't have that here, but instead they do have like, oh, we have bounty hunters, and it's all like a mixture of a bunch of pop culture references like Boba Fett, Spike from, Cowboy Bebop, and whatnot, and there's even a whole joke of like, oh, we even have studio execs here with the bad guys, and it's like, I mean, that's kind of funny, technically it's always pretty funny to acknowledge studio execs can be pretty evil, but, especially given right now, seeing how the Warner Bros. Execs are being like, it's like, yeah, this one actually hits pretty hard right now. On those fronts, it's very clever ending. It's what mostly keeps the movie going, because, at 90 minutes, it's not like it feels too long, but, I at least never felt bored by it. Even though I didn't really enjoy a lot of it, like, even though a lot of jokes still missed, even though the story, kind of butchers a lot of the messages that the original movie had, and frankly kind of butchers even the messages that this version has. But for what it's worth, those jokes just kept on coming, and it's like, okay, you have one good joke out of every 5 jokes you do, and you're doing a lot of jokes right now, so that's, even though that's still not a good ratio, it's a better ratio than you would imagine. And I'm just like, I wish the movie was more like this, because these, jokes work. The tone is great. It just doesn't deliver in other areas. Like, it also doesn't really deliver when it comes to, like, the voice acting in this movie. Not that the celebrity voices that they got were necessarily bad. I mean, I think Samuel Jackson, Michelle Yeoh, Jamin Hasu, Ricky Gervais even, they've done some good voice work here and there and other stuff, and here they're not exactly doing bad voice work. It's just that you can tell that none of them really cared about what they were doing. It's clearly a paycheck. At times, you can tell how bored they sounded, but yeah, I never felt annoyed by them. I was just like, okay, they don't really care about this. And realistically, I don't imagine voice actors doing it much better, like, not to diss voice actors or anything, but this is one of those movies where it kind of feels like, yeah, anyone involved with this is probably going to sound a bit bored, because it's, it's doing the Blazing Saddle stuff, but not as clever, but at the same time, some of it is kind of clever, so, I don't know, it's clearly a paycheck kind of movie, so, I don't know, I don't think it would have been saved one way or the other in that regard. It is done poorly, but, whatever, I got by it. Even the animation, doesn't look so great. Like, a lot of it just looks like TV animation. There's not a lot of interesting lighting at a lot of times, and the few places that there are, it still feels kind of flat. This was a movie that was in production for who knows how long. Like, I remember hearing it probably as far back as like 2013. So it's been a while, because I remember hearing like, oh yeah, they were doing Blazing Saddles but with cats and whatnot, and I'm like, whatever. And then when it was finally coming out, it was like, oh shit, they finally made that movie. But I don't know, it's in that regard, I'm just like, I mean, I don't know, for what it's worth, even though the animation isn't impressive, for a movie with that kind of a background, it surprised me that it doesn't look completely awful. Like, there's a few instances where it's kind of nice, like when there's flashback scenes, even though the filter they use isn't entirely great, it's like, okay, well, at least that creates some interesting, an interesting look for it, even though it's not great. There's some 2D bits in the start and later on that I'm like, I kind of wish this movie was completely 2D. It probably would have looked a lot better. But, I don't know, in that regard, again, nothing that I'm too mad about. Realistically, yeah, the stuff that works about this is kind of saving it a lot, just because I'm like, yeah, there's a lot in this that I get why people would hate this, and I get why some people might be less soft on this, I guess I could say, than I am being right now. But at the same time, I'm like, when it knocks a joke out of the park, it surprisingly does it well enough that I'm like, yeah, I kind of wish this movie was more like this. I kind of wish that this movie did spend its time being more clever. And I think a lot of that has to do with one of the directors of this movie being Rob Minkoff, who, previously, I could be messing it up, but I'm pretty sure did, like, The Lion King and the Mr. Peabody and Sherman movie. So it's like, he's no stranger to doing family features. And you can tell here, because it's like, yeah, it moves very quick. It doesn't feel like it's lagging on an area, even though the story is not the greatest, and some of the characterization just kind of ruins itself. It still has enough going for it that I'm like, okay, if you're showing this to a little kid, it'll be fine. If you're a parent watching this with your kid, you'll be okay. I don't really recommend it if you're an adult by yourself, even though that's the way I saw it. Unless you're a fan of old school fourth wall breaking stuff. Like, it kind of reminds me of, like, you know, like the old Looney Tunes cartoons or Tex Avery cartoons, where it's like, okay, you know, even though we're doing this big plot line or whatever, we all know it's all for shits and giggles, so we're not even going to attempt to add, like, you know, this extreme pathos to it. Like, you know, we know we're just kind of going through the tropes, going through the cliches, and just putting a clown nose on it. That's pretty much what the movie is. And in that regard, it does leave a satisfying enough mark that I can see some people walking away with it, you know, feeling some joy out of it, even though, you know, for the most part, again, it just fails a lot of the time, and it kind of sucks that it fails a lot of the time, because when it does shine, I'm just like, yeah, that was a pretty good joke, and I really liked what you were doing with that. I just wish you were doing that more. But yeah, it's surprisingly not the worst idea around. Remaking Blazing Saddles with cats and dogs and trying to strip a lot of the racism away works. You know, well, not works, but, you know, it doesn't completely flop. Again, I can see where kids might enjoy it, or some adults who like this kind of stuff might enjoy it. It's not the Minions. It's not Luck. It is a movie that feels kind of sincere in terms of, you know, the people making this clearly wanted to tell just a fun, goofy story. And in that realm, it's like, yeah, I can see what you did there. And I don't exactly hate you for what you do, even when it doesn't work out. But yeah, I do acknowledge that it definitely could have been better. So, assuming this is it, I mean, this movie did not make enough money to make a sequel, but if it had made a sequel, I wouldn't have been too upset about it, I guess. For the most part, not the worst thing ever. If you have to watch it, you'll get something out of it, maybe. If you don't have to watch it, by all means, don't watch it. I just really want to point out that it's just, I don't want to say a nothing movie, but that's kind of where it's at, where it's like, I mean, you know, I wasn't mad about it, but I did have some fun in it, but at the same time, there was stuff that I didn't really care for and didn't work for me, but at the same time, it wasn't the worst experience ever. So I don't really like doing scores for this kind of stuff, but I guess like a 2.5 stars is what I would give it. Maybe 2 stars, depending on whether you go with a 4-star or a 5-star rating. When it works, I had my fun. When it doesn't work, it was annoying, but nothing that ruined my day. For something that I watched while I was very tired, you know, because of the heat, I did not regret it, even though I don't really promote it. So, I don't know. I think I've kind of said all I needed to say about that. I will say it does kind of surprise me that, yes, it was able to last so long in development hell, and that a lot of these voices were attached from, you know, fairly early on, it seems. I don't know, I remember hearing, you know, like Samuel Jackson and Michelle Yao and Jamin Hansu at least, being involved with this for like years, like maybe like around 2018, 2017. So it's definitely something where it's like, okay, so they did stick around. These recordings might have been even from a decade ago, who knows? But yeah, it definitely is nothing I'd really have an issue with one way or the other. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not enthusiastic. I'm just kind of here. So, yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, you know, subscribe. Go to my Patreon, support me there. You know the drill. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.
Hornswogglers, serial killers, studio executives. Wow, looks like everyone's here.
Thank you for coming on and listening to me today. If you enjoyed it, you can always subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can follow my podcast. It's on Podbean, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And if you want to support me even more, there's always the option of Patreon. Patreon is a great way to support artists, and with that, you can always put in $1 or even more. It's all up to you, all just to help produce the show and other things I may do. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the coming future.